and welcome to this video. My name is Simon Powers. I'm the CEO and founder of AWA. Today we have Shannon Ewan with us to talk about the IC Agile accredited programs, in particular the expert program around the enterprise classes. So welcome, Shannon.
Thank you, Simon. I'm Shannon Ewan, the Managing Director of the International Consortium for Agile, and I'm joining today from Chicago. And IC Agile has been working in the space of Agile coaching and enterprise coaching for quite some time in terms of really looking at what are the competency-based learning journeys that we want to create to enable these important roles and capabilities in the world. And we spent quite a bit of time working through creating a program and a set of competencies around enterprise coaching. And I know, Simon, you've spent quite a bit of time in the field yourself. And so this question comes up a lot, and I'm curious to know, how do you distinguish what it means to be an enterprise coach versus an Agile team coach?
So if we think about those two roles, the enterprise coach and say an agile coach, the difference between those things, and really, in my experience, it's a scoping challenge. It's a scoping change or difference. And whereas when we typically think of Agile, where Agile's grown from, it's growing out of this sort of software development. It's grown out of software development and into the organization. And often when we think of Agile coaching, we're thinking around the delivery aspects of products and services. An enterprise coach really looks at a greater scope. And I think the two eventually merge in some ways, but the enterprise coach is really looking at, from a leadership perspective, a whole organizational perspective. And the reason why this is so significant is because the inner work that one has to do for being able to show up differently, the kind of gravitas, all those kind of things that is needed at that level is sometimes anyway significantly more or different rather to approach the kind of senior leadership. So that's one change, one difference. Other things are sort of things like structure and organizational patterns. Working in a larger scale, we have to consider different kind of patterns, different organizational structures, and that impacts a lot more people. So we're dealing with a lot more people, and that often means that our relationships with many people are different than when we have smaller groups to look after, when we get to know the faces and we get to know people. So our very relationships with the organization is different as well. And there's probably a lot more differences as well. One of the other differences I'd also like to highlight, some work that I've been thinking about lately, is around privilege. And privilege is something which we all have, depending on the context of where we find ourselves. And certainly an enterprise coach has a lot of privilege, and we show up as a particular persona or a particular role. And that privilege can be a fantastic thing, but it can also, by accident or just by lack of awareness, can also be abused. And what I mean by that is that if we show up and we're affecting all of those people in the organization's job roles, the relationships they have, the relationships with their close team members, the work that they do, the processes they follow, huge responsibility. And it's very easy to accidentally make a mess of that. And that's what I mean about abuse of privilege. And so we really have to look at the way that we show up and the way that we own that, so that we take the right stance as an enterprise coach, so that we don't cause any more suffering than is actually there, but actually make it better. We make a better organization where people are feeling more engaged, more connected, and we make a better organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how you really honed in on the potential impact of those roles and how important the Agile coaching and enterprise coaching roles are in the context of transformation. And when IC Agile crafted its learning pathways around this, we see both as equally needed, the Agile team coach and the enterprise coach. And it is a really deep learning journey that one needs to go on in order to be able to affect change in a meaningful and positive way. And the way we look at the Agile coach or the Agile team coach is really what are the stances that you want to bring forward to be able to help teams reach high performance, looking at the facilitation, training, mentoring, professional coaching stances that we study. And then when we get to the enterprise level, adding in those things like the ability to co-create change and in a responsible way, and look at leadership coaching, the full scope of the organization, the things that you mentioned, Simon, around structures, organizational design, et cetera, et cetera. So this really is a complex topic and area, and that's part of why we've been working together to create these programs that really are profound and impactful learning journeys.
Yeah, and I think that you've hit the nail on the head there, and certainly I want to make sure that that I amplify your voice with the fact that both roles are totally needed and equal in status and respect. Because sometimes in our organizations, or most organizations, have a hierarchical nature. Mm-hmm. And by that very nature, the way that we interact with that, sometimes by accident or by lack of awareness, we find ourselves taking on that hierarchy within the coaching world. And within coaching, there is no hierarchy. And so the agile coach, the team coach, or the enterprise coach, or leadership coach, or a one-to-one coach, all of those roles are absolutely needed, as you rightfully say. There's just a different scope and different skill sets, and different levels of different responsibilities. Not to say that any one is greater than another, but they are different. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think you were mentioning this earlier on, that when we look at the enterprise coach, the inner work that needs to have been done, because we talk about how you can't take an organization farther than you yourself can go, right? So you have to have done your own leadership development before you can develop others in that way.
And that's actually, as you know, is one of the key competencies for the for the enterprise, the 2 enterprise courses plus the expert. Is there's a huge area of the expert competencies, which are 1/4 of them, which are around developing self as leader. So this is around really growing oneself, the inner skills, if you like. I don't really like calling them soft skills, as many people say. I think that I think that word is going out of vogue now. But it really is that inner work of what how do you get triggered? How do you relate to people? How do you enable spaces for people to collaborate? All of those things are needed these days, and we didn't necessarily learn those at school on any management training. I don't know about anyone else, but I certainly, through the management trainings that I've seen, certainly wasn't available for those kind of deep skills that we teach on these classes, which are so sorely needed now. Yeah.
Absolutely. And Simon, I know you've got a lot of real world experience in this area. And so I'm sure the audience would like to know, what impacts have you seen enterprise coaches have on organizations, and where do you see them really influencing the overall journey towards business agility?
Yeah, I certainly do have a fair few battle scars, as it were. Although I don't like the military terms, but it is it's a hard job, and it is a hard it can be a lonely role as well. So there's 2 aspects. There's the aspects of what impact does it have on oneself being in this role, and what impact does it have on the people around you and the organization as a whole. And certainly I've seen that by taking kind of coaching classes and going on these kind of courses, I've seen a huge impact on attendees, including myself, in terms of our own personal growth, which then leads on to the second type of impact, which is for those around us. And in terms of real world experience, mostly over the last few years, I've been working with very senior executives, either board members or senior leadership teams, and their reports going down to kind of both in operations, but also in the enabling functions such as HR and legal and marketing and all of those kind of enabling roles within an organization. And the deep impact through the way that AWA brings these competencies to light is a radical shift in the way that change is made. And when we normally arrive in an organization, the remit is that we use our expertise to change others and to make their organization better. But very quickly, using our coaching stance, the impact that I've seen us have, and those people who that go through our courses and the reports back that we have, because we do like to keep in touch with people who come in our training to see whether the training's effective. So we have lots of reports and feedback coming back from real world scenarios. And in those cases where people have adopted a coaching stance, we change the impact. So I've seen directly and secondhand has been that the lasting effect of change is, well, one, it's so much more effective in terms of achieving the business results, but also it's so much longer lasting, because instead of telling people, having a small change group to go and do stuff to other people, what's actually happening is that through our way of working, we've included people, we've empowered people, and we've allowed people to make changes themselves in a coordinated manner, so that the whole organization gets involved and it incrementally steps towards something that's more beneficial and more effective. And so the real impact of this is better business results for longer. And more engaged staff. And we tend to have some fun along the way as well. Which,
and none of that sounds easy to do either, right? Yeah.
No, well, I mean, to be honest,
quite rewarding, but not easy, right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, we've I mean, in the early days of AWA, we were installing frameworks, telling people how to work. We were, and we had some success. We did have some short-term impacts. But ultimately, we would go back to organizations, 6 months, a year, 18 months later, and everyone would be doing the same thing as they were before. And that was extremely disappointing. And we had to take a long look at ourselves and long look at the way that we operated. And we went back to those clients and we said, look, hey, what's happened? And we did the research, we talked to people, and we had to sit down and say, well, look, what can we do differently to make this work? So it's been a journey to actually get to this point of what's effective and what isn't.
Yeah, and I think that's that experience, that journey, it's really the only way I think you could have gotten to where you are today, and your ability to not only do this, but then create and lead programs to help others develop the enterprise coaching capabilities as well. And I think, when we were talking early on, it was 2018, I believe, when we started creating the competencies for the IC Agile Certified Expert in Enterprise Coaching. And as a group, it was a committee of 6 of us, right? We really took the question seriously. What does it mean to be an enterprise coach? Because it was a term that's, it's out there in the industry, and there are a lot of people calling themselves enterprise coaches. And yet those who are bringing in enterprise coaches, we felt we had a responsibility to those folks to really let them know, this is what you need to look for. These are the capabilities that these people need to bring to the table. And if I recall, it was quite an arduous process that we went through in order to really define those competencies.
Oh, I mean, it's bringing a massive smile to my face, remembering the 2 years pretty much that we spent together working on this. And what a fantastic bunch of people. I mean, we really did get into what is it that makes this effective? What is it that makes this work? And I mean, I've learned huge amounts through that process as well. And, it did take us a number of years to really set the benchmark. And we always said right the way through this, we wanted the benchmark to be high enough that if people did this class, if people went on this cohort, that they would have a massively larger chance of success. I won't say that everyone who goes through the cohort is going to totally be able to radically change every single organization they touch, because it doesn't work like that.
Right.
But what it does is it allows people to show up in a much higher state, which allows a much more chance of success. And all of that knowledge and expertise over those years has gone into the competencies for IC Agile. And then, of course, we've built the AWA program on top of that with our expertise as well. So.
Yeah, and so we really look at 5 main areas, right? So we're looking at guiding the change process, and then we look at developing leadership in organizations, developing self as leader, right? So that inner work that we had talked about, yes. And then guiding organizational agility as well, which is where you get into some of the things around structure, process, strategy, et cetera. And then we really looked in depth at coaching range, because we've talked about a bunch of different things that enterprise coaches need to be able to do, and looking at individuals and systems and facilitate boundary spanning facilitation. I mean, there's just a huge range of capabilities that one needs to bring to the table, and also there's an awareness of what you as an individual are and are not strong at, and where you need to seek and bring in other coaches as well, right, to really help with the transformation.
Yeah. And I think, what you've just said is this is one of the reasons why it took so long. It's such a huge set of skills required to enable change in an organization, which is one of the reasons why it's so difficult. And I think that no one can do that alone. You can't learn all that stuff and be effective on your own. You have to do this with others. You have to network. And this is one of the reasons why I've always had such a strong, personally, as well as AWA, such a strong connection with IC Agile, because what you've done with all of your programs is gather people who have been so proactive and such brilliant people in the industry, in the wider community, and brought them together to brainstorm and work together as a community to create these competencies. And then with AWA, what we've done is we've taken that amazing work that you've done, and then we've used our own community and we've extended that into the courses, so that people create this network together when they're in the cohort, and they're linked to the wider AWA community, so that they're not alone, and that they have that connection, so that when you go out of the idealized classroom space and you go into the office, or when you're on the cohort and then you go back into the office, you're supported throughout that journey by the community, by all the work that's gone into this. And I think I think that there's such a good synergy there of leveraging that power of people, which is kind of in parallel really with what we're hoping to happen in organizations, which is leveraging the power of the people within the organization to make that change themselves, creating that support rather than this small body of experts who make that change. So, there's so many parallels with the way that we've approached this, both from IC Agile to AWA perspective and the approach for organizational change, which is really about people over process. And I think it's very, very effective and powerful.
And I know, we talked about you as a member of our committee to create the competencies, which took about 18 months or so, maybe a little bit longer. And then I know you've just developed a program with a co-leader. Maybe who is your audience? Who do you seek out? Who do you think who will benefit most from this program? And what would you like to see happen for them as a participant?
Yeah, so the program that we're talking about now is the Agile Enterprise Coaching Expert cohort. Forget my words out. And the audience for this is really anyone who finds themselves in the position of being responsible for an organization's success. Now, I know that could be everybody, but normally we have certain roles, normally senior people. These could be a senior leadership team, they could be managers, they could be the exec, or they could be the supporting functions of agile coaches, enterprise coaches, anybody who wants to get into that role or anyone who's playing that role already. So it's really people who are responsible for that change. And one of the things that we mentioned when we were looking at the competencies was the change strategy. And the way that I'm thinking about this is that you could break it down into two different types of roles in an organization. There's the vast majority of people who work in the organization on products and services and delivering things and enabling others to deliver things. And then there's a small amount of people who are working on the organization. And every organization needs the ability to adapt. Because as the world changes, as it does, as we've seen very dramatically over the last year, the world will change and continue to change, even within markets, as well as completely systemically. And an organization needs to be able to sense what's going on, make sense of it, and then adapt accordingly. And to do that, we need people who are working on the organization, people who sit back and say, how can we be more effective? How is it that we can continually change to a market without tiring out and exhausting people from change? How do we get products out the door when people change their mind every 20 minutes? People who are thinking about those problems, they're the people that this course is for.
Absolutely. And I'm smiling as I reflect on the AWA mission, which is to make working lives better, right? And so thinking about the passion that you're bringing, again, not only in the work that you've done yourself with organizations, but now bringing in this group of people to empower them to go. So it's amplifying that impact. And I can tell, just seeing your journey through this, what a labor of love it has been for you and AWA to create this program. As your program has gotten started, I guess, what are you experiencing?
There's oh god, it's so many things that I could express with that. I'll try and I think of the sort of top headlines. I mean, the first thing is as probably with any of these things, it's the experience with the people on the cohort. I mean, to start with, as with all things with team bonding, to start with, the first couple of calls, people are getting to know each other. It's a bit kind of like, oh, hello everybody, and then but we've just finished call 8 on the first cohort program. And by now, everybody has bonded. We are having, there's people who've set up their own Zoom calls. We've had people doing triads and small teams outside of the cohort talking to each other. We've had an awful lot, an amazing amount of connection as leaders of the cohort with all of the participants. And it's really that real strong bonding that's come on. That's the bit that immediately makes me glow inside. But of course, people come for that, but they also come for how effective it is actually within their own lives. And many of the participants have spoken already just in this short time about the changes that are happening within themselves and the way that they are showing up. And because of that, unlocking certain things that are happening for them and within the organization. And also the rigor at which they're approaching now their role of perhaps which they were sort of ad hocing it a little bit before, perhaps kind of without such a degree of certainty and confidence around the steps that they're taking, which are just going to increase the possibility or probability of success. So we're seeing, I mean, it's early days yet, but basically the effectiveness within the organization and the change within is starting to now manifest itself reasonably strongly, I would say.
That's great. I love what you just said about the rigor that they're bringing to their roles, because I remember when we were looking at the evaluation criteria for the competencies, and we had to step back and ask ourselves, can any of us on this committee actually meet all of these things, right? And are we, is it realistic for us to expect people to rise to that level? And we've got a couple of cases where it's happened, and it truly, magic is happening. And so I'm curious to know from you, what is your longer term vision with this in terms of maybe the expansion, or how many you'll run, or how you're going to change it over time?
So as with all things, we will, of course, change and upgrade over time with unknown things that will happen in the future. We're continually updating the classes based upon what happens in the world. And really, I imagine us continually running more public availability. So when people buy tickets, they come on as a member of the, not so much a member of the public, but they're just kind of funding it as a single person. But I'm also hoping that we start to see an uptake in organizations where a single organization then wants to run a cohort within the organization, because the public one is extremely powerful in a certain way. And a private, just like we run private training classes now, they're very powerful in a different way. And whereas we go deep in some areas for public classes, we can go very deep into the organizational context for private classes. And I'm hoping that we see a lot more organizations starting to realize the power of the cohort, and that we can start running these within large organizations. That would be my hope for the program, because I think that would allow the impact to be more felt within organizations. I mean, it's great when one person goes back to an organization and shares what they've learned, and they operate like that. That will significantly have a difference. But imagine if you had 20 coaches of an organization who went through these 9-month programs within one organization. The power of that would be incredible. And I'm hoping
talk about sustainable and lasting change, right?
It would change the organization forever. And it would change everybody there for the better. It would be amazing. Yeah. Very exciting times.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
No, this is fantastic work, really impactful work. And IC Agile is very, very happy to have AWA as one of our first providers of the Enterprise Coaching Cohort Program globally.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think it's a fantastic competencies that we've got here that we really do think will make a difference. And the world needs this difference, not just in organizations, but in the political sphere. We're not quite there yet, but in years to come, I hope that these changes within organizations, when people do become more socially responsible, when people do connect what they're doing in organizations to the greater societal needs, things like climate change, things like, do we take the vaccine or not? These are systemic issues, systemic things that one person's choice isn't important on its own, but everybody's choice individually makes a huge difference. And the types of these programs, they really do upgrade us in a way, our own ability to not only solve organizational challenges, but I think that in years and years to come, that we will see the same kind of things affecting us in a societal way. So we're really part of something a lot bigger, even though it's huge already.
Yeah,
I think that it's even bigger than we think. You know?
Yeah, and how programs like this can really level up the type of leadership that we see in the world. And I think what you're talking about, it's the world, the state of affairs is calling for a different type of leadership. And it's calling for it from a lot of people. And so it is this type of inner work and profound collaboration that brings about the types of changes that we're going to need to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, awesome for being part of it for all of us. You know, it's very exciting times, very exciting.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. So the next cohort that we're running will start this year. So if people are interested in going attending that, then please do get in touch with us and we can get you on the cohort.
Yeah. And it will definitely be a wonderful journey. So
Brilliant.
If you're interested to know more about the details of the competencies for the Expert in Enterprise Coaching and how this might differentiate from Agile coaching, please visit icagile.com.